The sky was heavy with dark clouds that morning, and the city seemed quieter than usual. People hurried across the wet streets, umbrellas moving like tiny shields against the steady drizzle. Cars splashed water along the sidewalks as they rushed past. It was a typical Monday in the heart of the city, the kind of day when everyone seemed lost in their own world of deadlines, meetings, and worries. Clara Reynolds stepped out of her black luxury car, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. She was dressed immaculately, as always, her navy blue suit pressed perfectly, her silk scarf tied neatly around her neck. To strangers, Clara looked like the picture of success, tall, confident, and untouchable. People often whispered her name in admiration, and sometimes even in fear. Clara was the kind of woman who had fought her way to the top of the business world, where very few women ever stood. As the CEO of one of the city's largest companies, she was used to being noticed. Employees straightened their backs when she passed by, and assistants scrambled to keep up with her fast stride. But Clara had also earned a reputation for being cold, distant, and almost impossible to approach. She was polite, yes, but she rarely smiled, and no one ever dared to ask about her personal life. It was as if she had built an invisible wall around herself that no one could climb over. That morning, as she reached the glass doors of her office building, something unusual happened. She felt a gentle tug on the sleeve of her coat. Surprised, Clara turned quickly. At first, she saw nothing, just the blur of umbrellas and people rushing by. Then she looked down. A little girl stood there, her small hand gripping Clara's coat sleeve tightly. The child could not have been more than 7 years old. Her hair was damp from the rain, sticking to her cheeks, and her thin dress clung to her little frame. She had no umbrella, no bag, nothing but a pair of worn shoes and a face that carried both innocence and sorrow. Clara's first instinct was confusion. Children did not normally approach her. "Yes?" she asked, her tone gentle but distant. She half expected the girl to ask for directions, or maybe for a coin. But the little girl looked up with wide brown eyes, glistening with tears. Her lips trembled as she whispered words Clara would never forget, "I don't have mama. Can I spend a day with you, ma'am?" The sentence hit Clara like a sudden wave crashing against a shore. She froze, staring at the child, unsure if she had heard correctly. Out of all the things the girl could have said, this was the last Clara expected. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. The busy street faded, the sound of car horns and footsteps dimmed. All Clara could see was the small face looking up at her with desperate hope. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She was rarely caught off guard, yet here she stood, unable to form a single sentence. The girl's request was so pure, so heartbreakingly simple, that it pierced through the steel armor Clara had built around herself. The security guard at the entrance stepped forward, ready to shoo the girl away. "Ma'am, don't worry, I'll handle this," he said firmly. But Clara raised her hand, stopping him. For reasons she could not explain, she did not want the child to be pushed aside like she was nothing. Clara looked down again, studying the girl carefully. "What's your name?" Clara asked softly. The girl wiped her wet cheeks with the back of her hand. "Emily," she whispered. Clara nodded slowly, her mind racing. She wanted to ask 100 questions. Where are your parents? Why are you here? Who takes care of you? But she could see the child was shivering, her small body trembling in the cold rain. Clara glanced at the people around them. Some passers-by slowed down, curious about the unusual sight of a powerful CEO standing in the rain with a small, drenched girl. Others simply hurried on, uninterested. For a woman like Clara, who lived every second of her life on schedule, this moment felt unreal. She should have walked inside, handed her coat to her assistant, and gone straight to her office for her first meeting of the day. But she didn't. She stood there, her heart caught in a strange and unfamiliar ache. "Where is your mama, Emily?" Clara asked gently. The girl's lips trembled again, and tears welled in her eyes. "I don't have one anymore," she said softly. "That's why. I just wanted to be with you, even for one day." Clara's chest tightened. The words dragged her backward, pulling her into memories she had buried long ago, memories of her own childhood, when she too had whispered similar words into the silence of the night. For a second, she felt like she was staring at a reflection of her younger self, fragile and alone. But Clara quickly shook the thought away. She could not afford to let old wounds open again. She cleared her throat, trying to compose herself. "Emily, you can't just walk up to strangers like this," she said, though her voice lacked its usual firmness. "It's not safe." The girl lowered her head, her tiny shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she murmured. "I just thought, maybe you could be my mama for one day. I promise I won't disturb you. I'll just sit quietly." Clara felt something stir deep within her. This wasn't a simple request for food or shelter. The child wasn't begging for money. She was begging for love, for warmth, for something Clara herself had secretly longed for as a child. The CEO stood in silence, torn between logic and emotion. Her logical mind screamed that she had no time for this, that she should let security handle it and move on. But her heart, the part she had silenced for so many years, whispered something different. For the first time in a long while, Clara didn't know what to do. She slowly reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded handkerchief. Kneeling down slightly so she was closer to Emily's height, she gently dabbed the rain from the girl's face. Emily looked at her with wide eyes, surprised at the kindness. "Emily," Clara said softly, I don't know if I can be what you're asking. But I promise I will not let you stand out here in the rain." The girl nodded slowly, as if those words alone gave her comfort. Behind them, Clara's assistant appeared, holding a tablet and looking confused at the sight. "Ma'am, your meeting with the investors is in 10 minutes, she reminded. Clara looked back at Emily, then at the towering glass building, then back at the little girl again. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of a choice she hadn't planned for. A choice that could change everything. And though she didn't know it yet, this single encounter, this fragile little voice asking for a mother's love, was about to open a door in Clara's heart that she thought had been locked forever. The rain stopped by the time Clara entered her tall office building. She walked across the polished marble floor, her assistant following closely behind with a long list of appointments for the day. The little girl's voice still echoed in Clara's ears, "I don't have mama. Can I spend a day with you?" Clara usually moved through her mornings like a machine, efficient and precise. Every minute of her time was scheduled. She liked it that way, busy, predictable, controlled. But today was different. As she stepped into the elevator, she found herself distracted, staring at the numbers glowing on the panel but not really seeing them. Her assistant spoke, "Ma'am, the investors are waiting for you on the 12th floor. After that, you have a lunch meeting with the city officials." Then in the afternoon, Clara raised her hand slightly, signaling for silence. "Not now," she said quietly. Her assistant stopped speaking at once, surprised by the tone. Clara rarely showed hesitation at work. Inside the elevator, Clara closed her eyes for a moment. She could still see Emily's small face, her damp hair, her trembling shoulders. That pleading voice had struck something in Clara's heart, something she had worked for years to silence. The doors opened, and Clara walked into the conference room where a group of investors sat waiting. She greeted them with her usual calm authority, but inside her thoughts kept drifting. As numbers, charts, and future plans were discussed, she saw Emily's eyes in her mind. Every time she tried to concentrate, that soft voice returned, "I just thought maybe you could be my mama for one day." The meeting ended, and everyone applauded Clara's strategies. But for the first time in years, She felt no pride. She excused herself quickly and went back to her office. Clara's office was on the top floor, with wide glass windows overlooking the city skyline. It was a space designed to impress: expensive furniture, modern art on the walls, and silence that commanded respect. She sat at her desk, staring at the city below. Normally, she would feel powerful looking at the busy streets, but now she felt strangely small. Her mind wandered to her own childhood. Clara had been only 9 when her mother passed away. She remembered the hollow emptiness that filled the house afterward. Her father had been kind but always busy with work, and Clara had learned early to hide her pain behind a mask of strength. She remembered standing by the window on rainy nights, wishing for anyone to hold her and tell her that everything would be all right. But no one came. And now, years later, a little girl had looked up at her and asked for the very thing Clara once longed for. It was as if life had brought her face to face with her younger self. Clara shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. "This is foolish," she whispered to herself. She was a CEO, not a mother. She had no time for children. Her world was filled with contracts, negotiations, and endless responsibilities. She had built everything she had by staying strong and focused, never letting emotions interfere. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, her heart refused to stay silent. Her phone buzzed. It was a reminder about her lunch meeting. Clara grabbed her bag and walked out, her assistant waiting with files. They drove to a fine restaurant where city officials welcomed her warmly. Everyone spoke of projects, numbers, and business opportunities, but Clara hardly tasted the food. Between polite nods and practiced smiles, her mind painted a picture of a small girl sitting alone in the rain. On her way back to the office, Clara leaned against the car seat, exhausted in a way she had not felt in years. Normally, a busy day energized her, but today it only weighed her down. She thought of Emily again. Where had she gone after that morning? Did someone take her home? Was she wandering the streets alone? For the first time, Clara felt a sharp sting of helplessness. She wasn't used to that feeling. She was used to solving problems with money, power, and influence. But here was a child who did not want money, who did not even ask for food. All she had asked for was love. And that was something Clara had locked away long ago. When evening came, Clara stayed in her office longer than usual. The city lights flickered outside her window. Papers were stacked neatly on her desk, reports ready for her review, but she could not bring herself to touch them. Instead, she opened the drawer where she kept an old photograph. It was the only photo she had of her mother smiling, holding Clara when she was just a baby. The edges of the picture were worn, but the warmth in her mother's eyes still shone brightly. Clara traced her fingers over the image, her chest tightening with emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. Her assistant knocked gently. "Ma'am, it's late. Should I call the driver?" Clara cleared her throat quickly and closed the drawer. "Yes, thank you," she replied, her voice calm as always. On the way home, the city streets were quieter. Clara stared out the car window, watching people hurry by. She wondered how many of them carried hidden pain like hers, how many children like Emily were out there, searching for comfort that never came. The thought stayed with her like a shadow. When she reached her apartment, she removed her coat and sat by the large window. Her home was beautiful but lonely, every corner spotless, every piece of furniture perfectly arranged, but lacking warmth. She poured herself a cup of tea, yet even the warmth of the drink did little to calm her restless heart. She closed her eyes and once again saw Emily's face. The innocence, the longing, the courage it must have taken for a little girl to approach a stranger and ask for something so simple, yet so profound. Clara realized that she had spent her entire life running from her past, building walls to protect herself, but now those walls were shaking. The struggle inside her grew stronger. Part of her whispered that she should forget the child. It wasn't her responsibility. Children like Emily were the concern of social workers and charities, not CEOs. But another part of her, the part she had buried for so long, whispered something different. That little girl had chosen her. Out of all the people in the busy city, Emily had reached for Clara's hand. Clara lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. She realized that no amount of success, wealth, or power had ever left her feeling as unsettled as one small child's request. The truth was clear: she was not struggling with business decisions or company challenges. She was struggling with her own heart. The cold, unshakable CEO the world admired was at war with the little girl inside her who still longed for love. And in that silent battle, Clara knew that something had already begun to change. The next morning arrived with brighter skies. Sunlight spilled across the tall buildings, reflecting on their glass walls like golden fire. Clara stood by her apartment window, sipping her morning coffee. Usually, this was the moment she mentally prepared herself for the day ahead: meetings, negotiations, endless decisions. But today, her thoughts drifted elsewhere. Emily. The little girl's face had stayed in Clara's mind all through the night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those brown eyes looking up at her, filled with hope and loneliness. Clara tried convincing herself to forget, but her heart refused. Something deep inside told her she couldn't simply walk away. By the time she reached her office building, Clara's eyes instinctively searched the street. And there she was. Emily sat quietly near the steps, hugging her knees, as if waiting. Her thin dress fluttered in the morning breeze. The moment she saw Clara, her face lit up with a fragile smile. Clara felt a strange warmth inside. She walked toward her slowly. "Emily," she said gently. "You're here again." The little girl nodded shyly. "I was hoping, maybe today you'll let me be with you, ma'am. Just for one day. I promise I won't make trouble." Clara paused. Her schedule was already packed. Important investors were flying in, and she had presentations to deliver. But then she remembered the long, lonely nights of her own childhood. She remembered wishing for just one kind soul to notice her. She took a deep breath. "All right, Emily," she said softly. "Come with me today." The girl's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really, ma'am?" Clara gave a small nod. "Yes. But you must stay close to me and behave, understood?" Emily grinned, her whole face lighting up. "I promise." They entered the building together. People stared in surprise, the powerful CEO walking with a small child holding her hand. Whispers followed them down the marble hallway, but Clara ignored them. Inside her office, Clara asked her assistant to bring some warm milk and breakfast for the child. Emily's eyes sparkled when the tray arrived: bread, butter, and a glass of milk. She ate quietly, stealing glances at Clara now and then, as though still unsure if she was really allowed to be there. Clara sat at her desk, pretending to review documents, but she kept watching Emily. The girl was so small, so delicate, yet carried herself with surprising patience. No demands, no complaints, just gratitude for the simplest things. When Clara had to attend her first meeting, she hesitated. She wondered if it was a mistake to bring Emily into her world. But the girl looked up at her eagerly. "Can I come too?" she asked in a whisper. Clara thought for a moment. Then she smiled faintly. "All right, but you must sit quietly." In the boardroom, the atmosphere was stiff as usual. Executives and investors filled the seats, waiting for Clara's powerful presence. But when she walked in with a little girl holding her hand, every eye widened. Clara said nothing about it. She simply gestured for Emily to sit in a corner with some paper and pencils her assistant had quickly provided. To everyone's surprise, Emily sat quietly, drawing little houses and flowers, humming softly to herself. Throughout the meeting, Clara noticed something unusual. Normally, these rooms felt heavy, filled with tension and formality. But today, the presence of one small child seemed to soften the air. People glanced at Emily now and then, their serious faces relaxing into faint smiles. Even Clara herself felt lighter. At one point, Emily looked up from her drawings and whispered, "You're very good at talking, ma'am." Clara almost laughed, something she hadn't done in a boardroom in years. After the meeting, as they walked out, her assistant whispered nervously, "Ma'am, is it all right to have her here?" Clara gave a calm look. "Yes. She is with me today." The assistant nodded quickly, though still puzzled. For lunch, Clara decided to take Emily to the company's dining area instead of her usual private reservation. Employees stared in shock as their strict CEO walked in with a child. Clara, however, felt oddly proud. She sat with Emily at a corner table, watching the girls' excitement at the trays of food. Emily looked around with wide eyes. "This place is so big, and so many people," she whispered. Clara found herself smiling. "Yes. It can feel overwhelming at first. But you'll get used to it." Emily giggled. "If I worked here, I'd eat dessert every day." Clara chuckled softly. "You sound like some of my staff." The day continued with Clara moving from one task to another, signing papers, attending calls, reviewing reports. And through it all, Emily followed quietly. Sometimes she sat drawing, sometimes she simply watched Clara with admiration, as if she were the most important person in the world. What surprised Clara most was how natural it felt. Instead of being a distraction, Emily's presence seemed to give her a sense of peace. She found herself speaking more kindly to her staff, listening with more patience, even smiling at small things she usually ignored. By late afternoon, Clara's energy usually began to fade. But today, she felt different. The weight of her responsibilities seemed lighter, as though Emily's innocent presence reminded her that life was more than numbers and deals. As the sun began to set, Clara decided to leave work early, a rare event. "Come, Emily," she said. "I want to show you something." She took Emily to a nearby park, where children laughed and ran across the grass. Emily's eyes sparkled with delight as she watched them. Clara guided her to a bench, and they sat together, watching the golden sky. "Do you play?" Clara asked. Emily nodded shyly. "Sometimes, but usually I just watch. It's nicer when you have someone with you." Clara's heart tightened. She looked at the girl, wondering how many times she had sat alone, wishing for a companion. Without thinking, Clara stood up. "Come on," she said, holding out her hand. Emily's eyes widened. "You'll play with me?" Clara hesitated. She hadn't played like a child in decades. But something inside urged her. "Yes," she said simply. They walked to the swings. Clara gently pushed Emily, who squealed with laughter as she went higher. Other children looked curiously, surprised to see a woman in a suit at the playground, but Clara didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt free. As the evening grew cooler, they sat again on the bench. Emily leaned her head against Clara's arm, her small voice soft. "Thank you, ma'am. This was the best day." Clara looked down at her, surprised by how natural it felt to have a child leaning on her. "I'm glad you're happy, Emily." The girl's next words, however, struck Clara deeply. "I wish I could be with you every day." Clara didn't answer right away. She stared at the fading light, her heart heavy with thoughts she could not yet untangle. But inside, she knew one thing for certain: this single day with Emily had touched her more than years of success ever had. When Clara finally dropped Emily off at the small foster home where she stayed, the girl hugged her tightly. "Goodbye, ma'am," she whispered. "You're the nicest person I've ever met." Clara sat in her car afterward, silent, her chest aching with emotions she had no name for. For so long, she had lived behind walls of strength and control. But one small girl had begun to break them down with nothing more than trust and love. And Clara knew her life would never be the same again. The next few days felt different for Clara. Her routine remained the same: meetings, phone calls, endless reports, but her heart was no longer the same. Something had shifted. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered Emily's small hand in hers, the sound of her laughter on the swings, and the way she leaned against her arm as if she belonged there. Clara had never imagined that one day with a child could leave such an impact on her. She found herself smiling at odd moments, and her employees began to whisper that the CEO seemed softer, more approachable. But alongside the warmth she felt, there was also a deep unease. Emily's words echoed in her mind, "I don't have mama." One afternoon, Clara could no longer ignore the pull in her heart. She asked her driver to take her to the foster home where Emily lived. The home was a modest building on a quiet street. The paint on the walls was fading, and the small garden outside was overgrown. A few children played in the yard, their laughter filling the air, but Clara noticed that their clothes were worn and their toys old. When she stepped inside, a kind-faced woman greeted her. "Good evening. You must be Miss Reynolds," the woman said, recognizing her instantly. "Emily told us about you." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "How is she?" she asked softly. The woman smiled gently. "She's a sweet child. Quiet, polite, always helping the younger ones." But, her voice trailed off for a moment, and her expression grew sad. "She carries a loneliness that is hard to miss. She doesn't talk much about her past, only that she lost her mother. Since then, she has longed for someone to fill that empty space in her heart." Clara listened carefully, her chest tightening. She followed the woman down a narrow hallway until they reached a small room where Emily sat, helping another child with a puzzle. When she saw Clara, her eyes widened with joy, and she ran forward, hugging her tightly. "Ma'am. You came!" Emily exclaimed. Clara knelt down, hugging her back. "Yes, Emily. I wanted to see you." The warmth of the little girl's embrace stirred something inside Clara she had not felt in decades: a sense of belonging, a being needed. For so long, she had believed her life was complete with success and wealth, but in that moment she realized how wrong she had been. They spent the evening together at the foster home. Emily proudly showed Clara the small bookshelf in the corner, the toys she liked, and even her little bed with a thin blanket. Clara looked around the room, her heart aching. The place was safe, but it lacked the tenderness of a real home. No photographs on the wall, no soft touch of a mother's hand, no one to tuck Emily in at night with a kiss on the forehead. That night, when Clara returned to her apartment, the silence felt heavier than ever. She sat on the sofa, staring at the city lights outside her window. She thought of her younger self again, how she had longed for comfort after losing her own mother. She had buried that pain under years of ambition, but Emily's presence had uncovered it once more. Clara realized she had been given a choice. She could walk away, return to her cold, controlled life, and forget about the little girl who had asked her for a mother's love. Or she could open her heart, risk the pain of vulnerability, and give Emily the care she so desperately needed. The decision weighed on her, but each day that passed, Clara found it harder to imagine a life without Emily in it. One weekend, Clara invited Emily to spend the day with her again. This time, she took her shopping for clothes. Emily's eyes grew wide at the rows of dresses, shoes, and ribbons. She touched each one with wonder, as if they were treasures from another world. "Choose what you like," Clara said kindly. Emily looked up, surprised. "Anything?" "Yes. Anything," Clara assured her. The girl hesitated at first, afraid to appear greedy, but Clara gently encouraged her. Soon Emily's face glowed with joy as she picked out a soft pink dress and a pair of shoes that actually fit her feet. When she tried them on, she twirled happily in front of the mirror. Clara watched with misty eyes, realizing how much joy small things could bring to a child. Afterward, Clara took her to a small bakery. Emily's laughter filled the air as they shared cakes and hot chocolate. For the first time in years, Clara didn't think about work, deadlines, or business. She simply enjoyed the company of the little girl who was slowly teaching her how to live again. But the true turning point came later that evening. As Clara was about to drop Emily back at the foster home, the girl suddenly grew quiet. She clutched Clara's hand tightly and looked up with eyes brimming with tears. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice trembling, "can I ask you something?" Clara knelt down, brushing Emily's hair back gently. "Of course, Emily. What is it?" The girl hesitated, then spoke with a courage far beyond her years. Could you be my mama? Even if it's just for a little while? I promise I'll be good. I won't make trouble. I just don't want to feel alone anymore." Clara's heart broke at those words. She pulled Emily into her arms, holding her tightly as tears filled her eyes. For the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to cry not for herself, but for this child who had shown her what it meant to love again. She realized then that she could not simply be a visitor in Emily's life. She could not walk away after seeing the depth of her need. This was no longer about charity or kindness, it was about compassion, about filling the emptiness in both their hearts. That night, Clara stayed awake long into the hours of darkness, thinking about Emily's request. She knew it would not be simple. There would be legal procedures, responsibilities, and changes she had never imagined making. But as she thought of Emily's innocent face and her small arms wrapped tightly around her, Clara felt a determination she had not felt in years. For the first time, Clara was ready to use her power and influence not for business deals or profits, but for something far greater: to give a child the gift of love and belonging. Her life, once built on walls of steel, had been softened by the smallest of hands. And in that moment, Clara understood that the greatest success she could ever achieve was not in boardrooms or skyscrapers, but in the heart of a little girl who had simply asked for a mother. The following weeks unfolded like a new chapter in Clara's life. Her days, once filled only with the noise of business, now carried a gentle warmth she had never known before. It was as if the little girl had opened a hidden door in her heart, one she hadn't dared to touch for many years. Clara began visiting Emily more often. Sometimes she would stop by the foster home in the evenings after work, surprising the girl with storybooks, puzzles, or even simple flowers she had picked from her own apartment balcony. Other times, she would bring Emily to her office, where the child had grown fond of sitting near the big glass window, watching the city lights sparkle like stars. Employees, who once feared their CEO's cold demeanor, now found themselves whispering in awe. Clara Reynolds was smiling more often. She spoke with patience and even laughed during small conversations. Some wondered if she had discovered a new secret to success, but those who had seen Emily by her side knew the truth: it wasn't business that had softened her. It was love. One Friday evening, Clara invited Emily to spend the weekend at her apartment. Emily's eyes widened as she stepped into the spacious home for the first time. The tall glass walls, the shining marble floors, and the neatly arranged furniture made the little girl gasp in wonder. "Wow," Emily whispered. "It looks like a palace." Clara knelt beside her, smiling gently. "But it's empty without laughter," she said. "I think you'll change that." And Emily did. That night, Clara discovered what it felt like to tuck a child into bed. She sat by Emily's side, reading softly from a storybook, watching her eyelids grow heavy until she drifted into peaceful sleep. When Clara kissed her forehead, her heart ached with both joy and a strange sorrow: joy that she could give Emily comfort, sorrow that the girl had lived so long without it. The next morning, they cooked breakfast together. Clara, who had always relied on chefs and restaurants, found herself learning how to flip pancakes while Emily giggled at her clumsy attempts. Flour dusted the counter, syrup spilled on the table, and for the first time in years, Clara laughed until tears filled her eyes. Later, they visited the park again. Emily ran freely across the grass, chasing butterflies, while Clara sat on a bench, her gaze softening. She realized how much she had missed in life while chasing success: the simple joys, the innocent laughter, the warmth of companionship. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily sat beside her on the bench. "Ma'am," she said softly, "do you know something?" "What is it, Emily?" Clara asked. "You're my favorite person in the world," the little girl whispered. Clara's eyes stung with tears. She wrapped her arm around Emily, pulling her close. "And you, Emily, are the best gift life has given me," she said. From that day forward, Clara made a decision that would forever change both their lives. She began the process of adopting Emily. It wasn't simple. There were papers to sign, officials to meet, and procedures to follow. But Clara faced each step with determination she had never felt before. For once, her ambition wasn't for herself, it was for a child who deserved love and a family. When the day finally came, and Clara held the official papers in her hand, Emily's face lit up with pure joy. She hugged Clara tightly, whispering, "Now I really have a mama." Clara held her close, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, Emily. From now on, you'll never be alone again." Life slowly transformed after that. Clara's once empty apartment filled with warmth and color. Drawings by Emily decorated the refrigerator. Laughter echoed in the hallways. The cold silence that had once dominated the home was replaced by the sound of stories at bedtime, songs hummed while cooking, and the gentle rhythm of shared moments. Even at work, Clara's perspective changed. She still managed her company with skill and authority, but she no longer measured success only in profits and contracts. She started new programs to support children in need, donating funds to foster homes and creating scholarships for orphans. Her employees, inspired by her example, joined in eagerly. What began as one child's plea for love grew into a ripple of compassion that touched many lives. But perhaps the greatest change was within Clara herself. She had always believed strength meant shutting out emotions, hiding vulnerability, and focusing only on ambition. But Emily taught her a different kind of strength: the strength to care, to open her heart, to give without expecting anything in return. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their home, watching the stars, Emily leaned against Clara's shoulder. "Ma'am, no, Mama," she corrected herself with a giggle, "do you ever get lonely now?" Clara smiled, brushing the girl's hair back. "Not anymore, my dear. Not since I met you." Emily looked up at the night sky, her small face glowing with happiness. "I think Mama is watching us from heaven," she whispered. "She must be happy I found you." Clara's throat tightened, and she held Emily close. "Yes, Emily. I believe she is smiling right now." For the first time in her life, Clara felt complete. Her success no longer felt hollow. Her achievements no longer seemed cold. She realized that life's true meaning was not in the buildings she owned or the titles she carried, but in the love she gave and received. Years later, when people spoke of Clara Reynolds, they no longer described her only as a powerful CEO. They spoke of her kindness, her compassion, and the little girl who had changed her life. And whenever Emily was asked how she found such a loving mother, she would smile softly and say, "One rainy morning, I just asked her. And she said yes." Clara often reflected on that first moment: the tug on her sleeve, the small trembling voice asking, "Can I spend a day with you, ma'am?" What began as a simple question had blossomed into a bond stronger than anything she had ever known. The story of Clara and Emily was more than just chance. It was proof that sometimes, the most unexpected encounters carry the power to heal old wounds and create new beginnings. Clara had gained more than a daughter. She had found herself again. And Emily, the little girl who once had no mama, finally had the love she had been searching for all along. Together, they built a life filled not with riches of gold, but with the treasures of laughter, warmth, and love, a story that would be remembered as a true reminder that hearts, once broken, can always be mended by kindness.